It was quite the season for Notre Dame in 2024, making it all the way to the national championship. I don't think many people expected them to do that. I think most people expected Notre Dame to be in the college football playoff, but getting to the national championship, it was a great season for Notre Dame. The schedule from last year to this year did change a lot. We're going to break that all down and, of course, give you a early projected record for this Notre Dame team. Just a reminder, we do have a Notre Dame channel here at the Voice of College Football. A new host over there, new show, lots of new content coming up, and I'll be doing some content as well. So check it out. If you're a Notre Dame fan, please go subscribe to our Notre Dame channel. If you look at Notre Dame's schedule in 2024, it turned out to not really be all that tough. Some of the teams that we thought would be a little bit better maybe weren't. They did have that big non-conference game against Texas A&M, huge win, and it's still crazy to look at that season, look at their schedule. I don't think anyone would have predicted them to lose to Northern Illinois if you had to pick one loss on that schedule. So you look at the schedule in 2025. Does it get easier? Does it get tougher? Let's break it down. Here is the full schedule, starting with Miami and going all the way to Stanford there at the end of the season. So what do you get home and away? Well, Texas A&M, Purdue, Boise State, NC State, USC, Navy, and Syracuse all at home. So they do have 7 home games. They have 5 road games. They've got Miami on the road, Arkansas on the road, Boston College, Pitt, and Stanford. So not too tough of a road schedule. Obviously, that Miami game will be really tough. Arkansas could potentially... That's a weird game, by the way. I mean, Notre Dame at Arkansas. That seems like a weird matchup. Anyways, those are your road games. Again, manageable road schedule. Miami going to be the toughest. And then, at home, really not that bad. Texas A&M is going to be a good team. I don't know if Boise State's going to be able to be where they were last year. USC, again, this schedule is not all that tough. I look at Texas A&M and Miami, those 2 games at the top, 2 games that will come early in the season. Those probably are going to be the toughest games for Notre Dame in 2025. So you look at the additions and subtractions from the ACC. They lose Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Virginia. Those teams were their ACC opponents last year. They also had Stanford. This year, they have Boston College, Miami, NC State, Pitt, and Syracuse, and they will still play Stanford. So I'm assuming the Stanford game is not part of the ACC rotation because of the fact that, again, they have one more game here, not counting Stanford. But yeah, I would say it's a pretty even trade. Louisville, given the fact that Florida State was so terrible last year, I think it's a pretty even trade. Now, if Florida State had been really good last year, I would say that this year's schedules would actually be easier for Notre Dame in the ACC. But because Florida State was terrible, I think the schedules are probably about the same. Still might be a little bit easier. I don't know. Miami obviously going to be tougher than any team that they played last year in the ACC. So how about their non-ACC schedule? So these are the games that they play in, we'll say the non-conference, the non-ACC games: Arkansas, Boise State, Navy, Texas A&M, Purdue, and USC. So what do you notice here? The only group of 5 teams are Boise State and Navy, quality opponents at the group of 5 level. And they don't have any FCS opponents, which they don't really play FCS teams, but still only 2 group of 5 games, and both of those games are against pretty good group of 5 teams. So it's interesting when you look at the schedule and you say, they don't have a lot of top-end teams, but they don't have really any, weeks off. They don't have any gimme games, although I guess they didn't last year either. When you look back at Northern Illinois, we thought that would be an easy win. So it's interesting looking at this schedule. So they'll start with Miami on Sunday, August 31st. That will be the Sunday there of Labor Day weekend on the road. That's going to be a huge game, one of the biggest non-conference games of the season. Then they get a bye week after that. Texas A&M on the 13th. So normally you wouldn't want to have a bye week in week 2, but I think in this scenario, it's actually pretty helpful because, for one thing, it'd be a short week playing on a Sunday, and also the fact that these are probably your 2 toughest games of the season. So having a bye week in between there, I think, is going to be very beneficial for Notre Dame. They play Purdue on September 20th. Then it's on the road at Arkansas September 27th. Again, could be a tricky game there. I don't know. That's just a weird matchup. Arkansas, I think, will be decent this year, and it is a tough place to play. That could be an interesting matchup there. You got Boise State on October 4th. We'll see if Boise State is as good as they were last year. If they are, then that's a huge game, but I don't know that they're going to be quite that good. You got NC State on October 11th. at home. Will they bounce back this year? We'll see. USC on the 18th. A rivalry game there. That should be a good one. USC, I don't know what that team's going to look like this coming season, so that's a tough one to predict. They get a bye week after that, so their second bye week. Every team will have 2 bye weeks because of the way that the Saturdays fall. And then you've got Boston College on the road November 1st. That's after bye week. Shouldn't be too tough. Navy after that on November 8th. Then it's on the road at Pittsburgh. Perhaps that game's a little bit tricky. Of course, that's not a very difficult place to play, but Pitt was a surprise team last year. Could they possibly get back to what they were early in the season? Last season, I don't know. Or will it be the Pitt team we saw at the end of the year when they weren't very good? Syracuse, November 22nd. That one, I don't think it'll be all that tough at home. Then Stanford on the road, November 29th. So again, I look at this schedule, and Arkansas and Boise State are interesting, but the 2 toughest games, I think, clearly to me, are Miami and Texas A&M, and those 2 games come in the first 2 games of the schedule here for Notre Dame, of course, with that bye week in between. Before we get to the record projection for Notre Dame, just a quick reminder that memberships are now available here on the channel. And I do want to give a shout out to our very first member, Andrew Smith, who's been a longtime supporter of the channel. Thank you, Andrew, for joining. If you'd like to join, again, all kinds of benefits, all kinds of perks here on the channel. Just become a member. You'll see a card pop up on the screen. Also, a link is down in the description below. Projections are usually high for Notre Dame. We're going to take a look at these 2025 projections, but first let's look back at some of the projections from previous years. Again, this is with our projected record formula. So you can see here in 2021, they were projected to go 10-2. They beat that. They went 11-1. 10-2 was also the projection in 22. They went 8-4. So a disappointing year in 23. They went 9-3 after they were projected to go 10-2. And then this past season, 9-3 was the projection. Record 11-1. They were better, I think, than what some people thought coming into the season. Also, though, you have to admit that the schedule did turn out to be a lot easier than we expected. I mean, look at Florida State. They were supposed to be, top 25 team. They were awful, and there were some other teams in there as well. So, yeah, projection is usually right there around 10-2, and sometimes they do better, sometimes they do worse. So it's definitely been, some up and down years over the past 4 years in terms of Notre Dame living up to the expectations, or actually exceeding expectations, and then sometimes disappointing. So what will we get in 2025? I don't know, but we're going to give you the projection. And again, this is with our projected record formula. So again, here's the schedule, and this is how it works. If the games, and this is all based off of our tier system. If you're wondering, Notre Dame is a tier 1 team. Notre Dame is a tier 1 team. They are at the very top. So keep that in mind there. If they play a team that's a tier below them, for example, a tier 2 team, they're going to be in that 61 to 70% range. If it's on the road, though, that becomes a 50-50 game. So home field advantage plays into this. And one way I like to look at it, this is not exactly how it works, but it kind of works out this way. If the game turns out in the white, those are like games where the spread's probably going to be around a field goal, 3, 4, 5 points, 60 to 70, more like a touchdown, 7, 8, 9 points, 70 to 71 to 80%. Those are your double-digit spreads. And then 80 and above, those are games where the spread should be, 20 or more. Again, that's not how we do this, but it usually works out that way. So that's just something to keep in mind, just another way to look at it. I think you do have several easy wins here: Purdue, NC State, Boston College, Navy, Syracuse, and Stanford. They are high enough in the tier rankings ahead of these teams to where these games do wind up in the green. Now, all of these are not the same. Like Navy, I'd put close to 100%. NC State, I'd put closer to 80%. Most of these games, actually, I'd put closer to 80% than 100%. But they are just high enough that they do go into the green, and these games are counted as wins. Of course, nothing is guaranteed. Again, the Northern Illinois game last year, that was a game in the green. So they could lose one of these games, but you feel pretty confident that they will take care of business in these 6 matchups. Okay, how about games in the blue? Games where Notre Dame should win, but it wouldn't be a shocking thing if they were to get upset. And we're talking about Arkansas on the road, Boise State at home, USC at home, and then on the road at Pittsburgh. Those are games, again, where Notre Dame should win. I think they will be, 10 to 14 point favorites in these games. But we don't, of course, we don't know how good all the teams are going to be. Arkansas could turn out to be really good this year. They could be a surprise team in the SEC. USC could turn things around. Pitt may play like they played early in the year last year and be a top 25 team. So it's, again, hard to predict, but just based off of our tier rankings, which does have a heavy emphasis on last season, these are the 4 games that the Notre Dame should win, but it would not be a complete shock if they were to lose. Again, you're looking at Arkansas on the road. I think that's a game that does have that upset alert potential for sure, mostly because it's on the road. Boise State, again, we don't know how good they're going to be compared to last year. USC, so many changes with the roster, with the transfer portal, but they could have a huge spring portal season. They could bring in a bunch of great players. We don't know. It's so early. That's why we call these very early projections. And then, like I said about Pittsburgh. So those are the 4 games where you feel pretty good if you're a Notre Dame fan, but you're not going to take anything for granted. You're not going to just expect to win those games. And then that leaves us with Texas A&M next. So Texas A&M, they're a tier 2 team. So they're a tier below Notre Dame. It's at home for Notre Dame. That's why this one is in the 61 to 70% range. This is a game where Notre Dame, I believe, will be favored by about a touchdown. They beat them last year on the road. They're at home this year. And again, how good will these teams be? How many pieces will they have coming back? There's a lot of time to do research, and I won't do predictions until probably around the 1st of June. Once we have more time to do the research on these teams and see exactly who's coming back, see the transfer portal additions, it takes some time. So my predictions will be coming down the road, but looking at it very early here, I do think Notre Dame maybe a tier above Texas A&M plus the game at home. That's why that one is in the purple. And then you've got Miami on the road. I do have Miami as a tier 2 team, so they're a tier below Notre Dame. But this game is on the road, so that's why it's in the white. It's a 50% game. It's one that could really go either way. And you talk about setting the tone for the season, that is exactly what is going to happen with this game. If Notre Dame goes on the road and they beat Miami, and then let's say they beat Texas A&M in their second game coming off a bye week, you're going to start looking at this team potentially going undefeated, and a team that I think you're going to feel very confident in getting back to the college football playoffs. So huge games to start off the season, and if they split those games, then you look at the rest of the schedule, the odds would say they're going to trip up somewhere, and that is kind of what we get with this projection. So the projected record for Notre Dame is 10-2, which is what it has been. I showed you there at the beginning. This has been the projection almost every year since I've been doing this, and it's the projection again this year. One of the big things, like I said, is how good will all these teams be? We think we know, but maybe we don't. Maybe Miami turns out to be horrible. I don't know. Maybe Miami turns out to be a top 5 team. It's tough to say. But yeah, this is the projection here for Notre Dame. Again, a very early projection, but once again expected to be right there in the playoff hunt and projected to go 10-2.